It's my life. Eating berries and stones is what fills me up at night. I am the Maker and Masochist. Welcome back to another installment. One here from r/no sleep. From the author, Carrot Caker. Title: If you saw something, no you didn't. Before we get into it, if you could please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel. 85% of people that watch this are not subscribed. I'd like that to get a little bit better. I know that people don't want to clog their feed with things that they don't watch, but I promise to you that I'll continue to make better and better content. Appreciate all of your support. Let's get into it. That's the first rule they teach you in these woods, especially as a forest ranger. It's not some quirky saying, it's the rule. You learn fast, and the things you think you see are better left buried deep in the back of your mind. Because when you start asking questions about those things, when you start telling people about them, bad things happen. Real bad. I've been a ranger for almost 5 years now, and I'd like to say that I have a handle on things. The forest is peaceful, a place to lose yourself, to think. Sure, there's the occasional weird noise in the distance, the rustling of leaves in the dead of night whenever there's no wind, the flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye. But that's just nature, right? Well, 2 weeks on the job, I found out firsthand why we have that rule. I was doing my regular rounds, checking the perimeter, making sure the trail markers were still intact, and the cabins were locked up tight, the usual stuff. There's a trail about 5 miles into the woods that people like to hike. A perfect place for a little solitude and quiet picturesque. It's calm out there, quiet. You don't expect anything to happen in a place like that. But that day, something felt off. The trees felt taller, the air heavier. It was a late afternoon, and while the sun should have been setting soon, it felt like it was setting faster than usual. I shook it off, focused on the job. As I was picking up an empty bag of chips from the trail, the wind picked up, making the trees sway and creak. But then, something caught my eye. Just off the path, I saw movement, a figure. It wasn't a person, but it also didn't look like any animal I've seen. A silhouette, shifting behind the trees, far enough that I couldn't make out details, but close enough that I knew it was there. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to think it was just some lost hiker, maybe an animal moving in the underbrush. I called out, but the forest swallowed my voice, the wind carrying it away. I stepped off the path and approached the area where I thought I'd seen it, but when I reached the spot, there was nothing, just woods, silent and empty. I searched for a few seconds, but found no footprints, no signs of anyone or anything being there just a few moments ago. I started walking back towards the trail, and then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Light, as if someone was following just a few paces behind. My pulse quickened. I turned to see who or what it was. Nothing. I'm not an idiot. I knew better than to ignore it, so I quickened my pace. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, a trick of the mind. But the footsteps didn't stop. They stayed right there, shadowing mine, perfectly in sync. And then it stopped. The sudden silence, minus the crunch of my boots on the trail, made the whole situation even more terrifying. I paused for a moment, too scared of what may happen if I turned around. So many choices ran through my head until I decided on one. Well, I wouldn't say I decided, more like my body chose for me. A surge of adrenaline pushed me to start speed walking back to the ranger station, something in me screaming that if I didn't start running, I'd be dead. My heart pounded as if I was in a marathon. With each stride, goosebumps formed. The crisp wind moving my hair to my face and carried the scent of vanilla through the air. The smell reminding me that any animal could find me where I am, especially the thing following. Creepy. Something is stalking her, and she knows. She's hitting that fight or flight mechanism right now in her mind, something that we've been programmed since prehistoric times. She obviously doesn't want to fight whatever is out there, so she's gonna hurry up and get back. I reached the station and locked the door. After a few minutes of nothing, I sat behind the desk, chuckling at myself for getting all worked up, and for believing the other rangers' stories. A couple of them even went as far to claim they saw stuff. At first, I thought they were just trying to mess with the new guy and get him all scared before the first watch. In that moment of giggling at their stories, I realized one of them was lining up exactly like what happened outside. The following footsteps, the feeling of being stared down, the shadow. Even the time of year is exactly when they said it happened. Trying to clear my mind from that, I decided to examine the trail cam footage on the old monitor. It was the most peaceful part of the job. Just stare at the footage and take notes of the animals. A bit too peaceful given the fact that I fell asleep in front of the screen for a little. A loud noise jolted me out of sleep, causing me to fall out of the chair. I picked myself up off the floor and walked over to the window to investigate. I flipped on the floodlights outside the cabin and see a large branch just lying on the front porch. At first, I brushed it off. It's a forest and branches break all the time, only to immediately remember the fact the station is in the middle of a small clearing. The only way a branch that size would end up here is during a hurricane, and it most certainly wasn't raining. A multitude of reasons raced through my head, anything that could rationally explain how this hunk of wood got there. I walked away from the window over to the coffee bar, landing on the reason being a giant gust of wind flinging the branch to its spot. Taking a sip of my coffee and quietly humming to myself, I situate myself back into the semi-comfortable computer chair. A few more reports later, I'm back to watching the cameras and naming few faces. A sow, Moon, gave birth earlier in the year and the Rangers fell in love with the two cubs. Due to their fur making it look light, has eyebrows, and Shine has a little mustache. So one of my duties tonight is to try to spot them and update their information. After 3 hours, I almost gave up hope, but then I saw movement around the cave Moon had chosen her home for the 4 years in a row. But it wasn't her. It looked almost like a deer, only the deer was trying to act human. Standing on its two hind legs with a hunched back, it walked around the flattened area, the eyes glowing, bringing in the night vision lens every time it looked in the direction of the camera. Then it paused. It sniffed the air and looked straight at the camera. I jumped back, shocked at the accurate eye contact made through the screen. I readjusted my chair and continued to watch whatever this thing was, writing down every detail I could get while it was still visible. The creature started walking towards the tree that the camera was perched on, its steps slow and deliberate. Once it reached the trunk, the thing raised its hands to the bark and started shoving. Each push moved the tree, therefore the camera, to shake immensely. I stood up and pushed back the chair, the fear truly setting in. Quickly grabbing the walkie on my belt, I called into the closest station near me. Surely someone else is seeing this. The only problem was that all the channels I tried were off, or at least that's what I assumed. At the time, it didn't make sense. When the fifth station was also static, I gave up that plan. I looked back at the screen and seen the creature's shoving had only gotten more aggressive. By the looks of it, the poplar was rocking back and forth at this point. Just then, in the distance, the loud sounds of groaning, cracking, and popping cut through the air. Moments later, a crash followed and the camera was no longer in signal. With no other plan in mind, I scribbled the events unfolding into the notebook. Semi-worried no one would believe me, semi-worried this would be the pages that the police would find for evidence. The chaos didn't stop there. Not even 10 minutes later, another trail cam, the one filming the trail I checked earlier, showed movement. This activity was different though. The dark shape moved quickly, too quickly, back and forth in front of the camera, as if it was playing with it. I continued my notes until I glanced up and saw it staring at me, its face closer than before, close enough that I could truly see what the creature was out there. It wasn't a deer, not completely anyway. Its head was shaped like a German shepherd's, and eyes sat too close to the front of its face, once again glowing in the night vision. The sight of this thing making me scream. I slapped my hands over my mouth and stared at the computer screen. The creature was now looking in the direction of the cabin. My eyes clenched shut as a few tears ran down my face, the fear taking complete hold of me. Quiet sobs left my mouth as I checked the camera once again. It was gone. You'd expect my reaction to be relief. It was not. To the depths of my core, I knew it really wasn't gone. All I could think was, it's coming here. It's coming for me. I started rummaging through the drawers of the desk, wincing at every squeak of the steel as they opened. In the bottom left drawer, I found a spiral notebook with no cover page. The first thing written talking about specific animals to avoid due to temperament. I almost tossed it aside, but the loose cover page at the bottom of the drawer caught my eye. In case of all emergencies. At this point, anything could help. Plus, this should count as one of the emergencies, right? Thank God for whoever was looking out for me, because the second page in the notebook, I learned there is a specific flare gun behind the antique picture of the forest. I run over to the wall and take down the picture, setting it on the mantel of the fireplace. And just like the notebook said, a small recessed shelf hidden behind the picture held a red flare gun and 3 rounds sitting next to it. Realizing I neglected to read what to do with the flare, I hurried over to the book again and see at the bottom in red, "In case of unique emergencies, fire 3 shots into the sky." The sound of leaves crunching loudly catches my attention and breath. I stand there paralyzed in terror, unsure of what to do. I can't go outside. I can't fire it in here. If I open a window to fire it, it will definitely get me before I could shoot the second one, let alone the third one. The lack of options getting to my head, I began to pace back and forth. Then the steps outside stilled, replacing the sound with jagged breathing. Through the monitor, I can see the creature was standing in the middle of the small gravel parking lot, staring at the station with his head tilted ever so slightly. I run into the back office, flare gun and cartridges in hand, and lock the doorknob and 2 deadbolt locks. I always thought these were for bear attacks, but it seems like situations like these have happened before. Looking around the tattered office, I hoped to find anything that could help me. I noticed that the light hadn't been turned on, and look up to the skylight with a small black handle. I grab the stepladder and reach for the small handle to see which way it opens. Twisting it slowly, I gently push up and it doesn't budge. The bookcase in the office was the perfect height and spot to sit with your foot on the step stool for balance, so I did just that. I pushed a little harder, but it still didn't budge. On a whim, I tried pulling it open, and it worked. Pulling the cartridges out of my pocket, I opened the window, just enough to aim the flares at the sky. I loaded the first one and aimed at the moon. 1 down. With the other 2 in my hand, I quickly reloaded another cartridge and squeezed the trigger. 2, 1 more to go. The sound of a large stomp from the roof almost caused me to drop the last round. I quickly caught it and shoved it into the flare gun. The sound of heavy footsteps nearing me raised my adrenaline and caused me to shake. I aim at the moon again and pull. Last one, help is coming. I slammed the window shut and twist the handle lock just as the creature jumped into view. It stared at me through the glass, its eyes wide enough to see the whites. The thing opened its mouth into what I could only assume was a smile, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. Opened its mouth and let out a scream I would describe as a shrieking whistle. I cower and end up falling off the bookshelf, my landing cushioned by the scattered reports and other papers. Groaning, I pulled myself into the fetal position and wait for one of 2 things. 1, help comes and somehow rescues me. 2, this thing makes me its next meal. The sound of hooves slamming on the glass had me leaning towards the latter, being more realistic. I rocked myself, each slam of its hooves making me wince. It didn't take long for the sound of the glass starting to crack to fill the air. I hold my breath, unprepared for what horror lay in store. Then I heard it. The sound of multiple vehicles from all around the cabin swiftly pulling up, and the stomping stopped. Sounds of car doors slamming and 3 gunshots rang in the air. I looked up at the skylight, and the creature was gone. The ranger from another station banged on the front door. It took me a minute to compose myself and let him in. Immediately, they asked me what happened. I told them everything that happened as best I could, showed them the notebook for my details. I asked what the thing was, and they said it's best if I don't ask things I don't want to know. Next time, ignore it. A ranger chuckled out and playfully threw his arms onto my shoulders. Remember the golden rule. If you think you see something, no you don't. I live by those words now and have kept out of trouble, for the most part, these past few years. So, if you're reading this, consider it as an example of why we have the golden rule. And good luck. What do you think it was in the woods? Put in the comments below. I think I know what it was. Appreciate all of you watching and liking and subscribing. Until next time, I am the Masochist. Farewell.